halfway through buttoning my coat when my phone lit up on the counter. It was my accountant, not a call, a text. 3 words in all caps. Stop. Don't signed. Streitzer tent. Signed. I stood there in my kitchen, one button left undone, reading it again. Then a second message came through. Call me right now. Do not go to that meeting. My brother-in-law had set up the meeting. A family sit-down, he called it. Neutral ground. Just to talk through the paperwork for my grandmother's estate before everything went to probate. He'd been very calm about it. Very reasonable. That should have been my first warning. I called my accountant back. She picked up on the first ring. Don't go, she said, before I could even say hello. I found something last night. I've been up since 2 in the morning and I need you to hear all of it before you step foot in that room. I sat down on my kitchen stool and didn't take my coat off for the next 40 minutes. My grandmother passed in late October. She'd lived in the same house in Oakville her entire adult life. A narrow Victorian on a quiet street 2 blocks from the lake, with a workshop in the backyard where she used to refinish furniture. She left behind a small investment portfolio, the house, and enough sentimental clutter to fill 3 moving trucks. She also left behind my uncle and my brother-in-law, 2 men who had very different relationships with her money than the rest of us did. My uncle had been estranged from the family for almost a decade, right up until about 8 months before my grandmother got sick. Then, suddenly, he was at every Sunday dinner, driving her to appointments, calling twice a week. My mom thought it was a blessing. I thought the timing was interesting. I didn't say that out loud because I was trying to be a good person. My brother-in-law was a different story. He'd married my sister 6 years ago, and from the beginning, he treated family gatherings like business development opportunities. He asked my grandmother questions about her finances at Christmas dinner. He recommended she switch advisors to someone he knew. She didn't, but she was polite about it. He was always polite. That was the thing about him. He was never loud about what he wanted. He just arranged things quietly until the arrangement suited him. When my grandmother died, he stepped in almost immediately to help manage the paperwork. My sister seemed relieved. She'd just gone back to work after mat leave and her plate was full. He told her he'd handle it. He told all of us he'd handle it. I didn't ask enough questions. I was grieving. We all were. My grandmother's estate wasn't complicated on paper. The house, the investments, split between her 2 children, my mom and my uncle, with some smaller amounts set aside for grandchildren. She had a will. She had an executor. The executor was my uncle. That was the part that started to bother me about 3 weeks after the funeral. My uncle hadn't spoken to my grandmother for 9 years. He missed my grandfather's death. He missed my mom's cancer diagnosis. He showed back up in her life right before she was diagnosed with the thing that killed her, and within 2 months of the funeral, he was the executor of her estate. I asked my mom about it. She said grandmother had updated her will about a year before she died. She said it made sense. He was her son after all. Blood. She said she trusted him. I didn't push it. I should have pushed it. The thing that made me finally call my accountant wasn't anything dramatic. It was a number. I was going through some old emails. I'd been helping my grandmother with some online banking the year before she passed. Just small things, making sure her automatic payments went through, and I noticed a transfer I didn't recognize. $12,000 moved out of her savings account 8 months before she died. The memo line said, home renovation. I walked through that house every week for the last year of her grandmother's life. The floors were the same. The kitchen was the same. The workshop in the backyard was the same. There was no renovation. I forwarded the email to my accountant with one line. Does this look right to you? She called me the next morning and said she needed a few days. She called me back at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. She'd found 4 transfers, not 1. 4. Spread out over 14 months, always with memo lines that sounded plausible. Home repair, medical equipment, property maintenance, legal consultation. Totaling just over $41,000. And every single transfer had been initiated from my grandmother's account while she was in the early stages of a cognitive decline that her doctor had documented in writing. Someone had access to her online banking, my accountant told me. The login IP addresses aren't from her house. I can't tell you for certain who it was, but I can tell you this money didn't go to any renovation and it didn't go to any legal consultation. I've been through every record you sent me. I asked her who she thought had done it. She was quiet for a moment. I think you already know. I did. I just didn't want to say it. The meeting my brother-in-law had scheduled was for the following Thursday. He'd framed it as a family check-in, a chance to get everyone on the same page about the estate before the probate process moved forward. He'd sent a shared document with a summary of the assets. The numbers in that document did not match the numbers I had from my grandmother's bank records. The house was listed at assessed value, not market value. In Oakville, in the current market, that difference was not small. There was also a line item I didn't understand, a management fee, ongoing, payable to a numbered company I'd never heard of. The footnote said it covered estate administration services provided since the date of death. When I asked my brother-in-law what the numbered company was, he told me not to worry about it. He said it was standard. He said the lawyer had approved it. I called the lawyer. The lawyer had never heard of it. My accountant, to her enormous credit, did not sleep the night before that Thursday meeting. She called me at 2 a.m, not to panic me, but because she just found something and she needed me to know before I walked into that room and signed anything. The number company was registered 6 weeks after my grandmother's death. One of the directors was my brother-in-law. The other director was my uncle. They had set up a company together. While my uncle was the executor of my grandmother's estate, he had quietly partnered with my brother-in-law to bill that same estate for services that did not exist. This was not a family misunderstanding. This was fraud. I didn't go to the meeting. I called my mom instead. She didn't believe me at first. I don't say that with any bitterness. She'd been through a lot. She was still grieving, and she'd spent the last several months believing that her brother had come back to her and was trying to make things right. That belief was not something I wanted to take from her. But I also couldn't let her walk into that room uninformed. I read her everything I had. She went very quiet. Then she said, "How long?" The transfer started 14 months before she died, when she was already having memory issues. Another silence. She wouldn't have caught it, my mom said. She trusted people she never would have thought to look. I told her I was going to a lawyer the next morning, not the estate lawyer my uncle had recommended, my own lawyer, someone outside all of this. She said, "I'll come with you." My lawyer was calm in the way that people are calm when they are genuinely not surprised by what they are hearing. She took notes. She asked precise questions. She asked me for every document I had, the bank records, the email correspondence, the corporate registry for the numbered company, the discrepancy in the property valuation, the footnote about the management fee. She told me 3 things. First, what had happened to those transfers was likely financial elder abuse under the Criminal Code of Canada, and the fact that my grandmother had documented cognitive decline at the time of the transactions made it worse, not better, for the people who had made them. Second, an executor has a fiduciary duty to the estate. Entering into a financial arrangement with a third party to bill the estate for fictional services while serving as executor was a serious breach of that duty and potentially criminal. Third, the estate sale could not proceed while this was under investigation. The house could not be sold. The assets could not be distributed. Everything would stop. I asked what happened to my uncle's role as executor. She said, "He won't have it for much longer." The Thursday meeting happened without me and without my mom. My brother-in-law sat in a boardroom with my uncle and a lawyer they'd hired together waiting for us. When we didn't show, he texted my sister. She forwarded me the text. It said, "Your sister is making this very difficult. She's going to regret blowing this up." My sister, to her credit, wrote back, "What exactly is she blowing up?" He didn't respond to that. What happened next took several months, and I'm not going to pretend it was clean or easy or that it didn't cost all of us something. Family investigations never look the way you think they will. There were lawyers and forensic accountants and a complaint filed with the Ontario Securities Commission because one of those transfers had briefly touched an investment account in a way that raised additional questions. There were conversations with my mom that left both of us exhausted. There were nights where I wondered whether I should have just let it go, taken my smaller share, and preserved whatever piece was left. But there was a moment about 4 months in that made me stop second-guessing everything. My sister found a letter in a box she'd been putting off going through. It was from my grandmother, written about 2 years before she died, in the period when she was still sharp. It was addressed to my mom, but my grandmother had written my mom's full name on the outside. And below it, "Do not let anyone tell you what I would have wanted." I have written it down. Inside was 3 pages of small, careful handwriting. She described the house. She described what it meant to her. She said she wanted my mom to have it, not to sell it, Not to split the proceeds through some corporate arrangement she'd never agreed to, but to have it, to keep it if she wanted to, or to sell it on her own terms when she was ready. She wrote about my uncle. She wrote that she loved him, but that she was not naive. She said she hoped she was wrong about why he'd come back, but that she wanted my mom to know if anything looks strange when I'm gone. Trust your instincts. My grandmother had trusted her instincts about him for years. She just couldn't say it plainly while she was alive. The executor was removed by the court and replaced with an independent administrator appointed through the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. The number company was dissolved. The management fees were reversed. The 4 transfers were flagged in a formal complaint to the police, and the investigation is ongoing. I won't say more than that while it's active, but I will say that my uncle's lawyer has stopped returning calls, which I've been told is not usually a good sign. The house is still standing. My mom went over there last month to go through the workshop. She called me from the backyard, standing next to the old refinishing table, and she didn't say much. Just that it smelled like linseed oil and wood shavings, and it was exactly the same as when she was a kid. She's keeping the house. There's a part of this I think about more than the legal part. It's the part about the letter. My grandmother knew something was off. She documented it. She wrote it down and sealed it and put it somewhere safe because she understood, even before her mind started to slip, that there were people around her who were counting on her not to be believed, or not to be found, or on everyone being too tired and too sad and too tangled up in grief to look closely at the numbers. She was counting on us to look closely. I almost didn't. I almost went to that meeting, signed the documents, taken my smaller cut, and told myself it was probably fine, that I was probably being paranoid. That grief makes everything look suspicious. The $12,000 transfer I noticed by accident. The accountant I'd hired for my own freelance work, not for any of this. The email I almost deleted. The number that didn't add up. None of it was dramatic. None of it happened the way it happens in movies, with one big document and one big revelation. It was just small things, noticed slowly, followed up on when it would have been easier not to. My grandmother spent decades refinishing other people's furniture, taking things that were worn down and damaged and working on them until they were solid again. She was meticulous. She kept records. She labeled every drawer in that workshop. She raised my mom to pay attention. I'm glad one of us did. I think about my grandmother's workshop a lot. The way she labeled every drawer, the way she never rushed a repair job. She used to say that the worst thing you could do to a good piece of furniture was skip a step because you were tired, that the wood would remember. She was right about more than furniture. What my uncle and my brother-in-law didn't happen overnight. It built slowly, one quiet arrangement at a time, over months and years, in the spaces where no one was looking closely enough. They were counting on grief to do what it always does, blur the edges, make people want peace more than they want answers. And for a while it worked. Not because we were foolish, but because grief genuinely does that to you. It softens your suspicion. It makes confrontation feel cruel when everyone is supposed to be holding each other up. But there's something that grief can't undo, and I think it's the thing my grandmother understood when she wrote that letter. She understood that the people who love you honestly will eventually look, not because they're suspicious by nature, or because they're looking for a fight, but because when something doesn't sit right, a person with a clear conscience can't leave it alone. That instinct, that small uncomfortable feeling when a number doesn't match, when a memo line doesn't add up, that's not paranoia. That's integrity doing its job quietly. I wasn't brave when I found that first transfer. I was just paying attention. I forwarded one email because something felt off. Everything else followed from that. My accountant stayed up until 2 a.m, not because she was obligated to, but because she's someone who takes her work seriously enough to see it through. That kind of diligence, the quiet, unglamorous kind, is what actually stopped this. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a lucky break, just 2 people who refused to shrug and move on. I've thought about what would have happened if I'd gone to that meeting, if I'd signed, if I told myself I was probably overthinking it, that family doesn't do that the lawyer must have approved it. I would have lost a portion of what my grandmother built over a lifetime. My mom would never have known the full truth, and 2 men who had been methodically stealing from a woman with memory loss would have walked away clean. That's the version of events that nearly happened. The only reason it didn't is because I was willing to be uncomfortable. Willing to ask one question that might make things awkward. Willing to look like the difficult one in the family for a little while. My grandmother spent decades taking damaged things and making them whole again. She kept records, she paid attention, she raised my mom to do the same. I'm still learning how to be the kind of person who notices and follows through and doesn't talk herself out of the things she already knows. It's not always easy. But I think it's the only way to actually protect the people and the places that matter to you, not with noise, but with steadiness, with the willingness to stay in the hard thing until you find the truth at the bottom of it. The house is still there. My mom is keeping it. That's enough.